Hey, good morning, YouTube. Old Guy 379 here. Just another little quick video. Changes in the industry. Things that I've noticed. After having been away from it since, 2015 to 2019, like I said in some of my previous videos, if you guys have seen them, my wife got ill and I got off the road and managed a fleet of trucks and a warehouse and operations for that. Then they started having some financial problems due to some really poor management above me. Thank God it wasn't my fault. I'm grateful for that. I would have just ran and hid. And then 2019 went back a little bit, hauling oversized and farm equipment. And then in late 2019 went back into the office as a general manager for a truck rental and leasing company. But overall, being away from the industry, as far as being out over the road for close to 8 years, man, a lot has changed. And some of it for the better, some of it for the worse. I think one of the things that's changed really for the worse is the amount of traffic that's on the road. The amount of truck traffic and the amount of car traffic, that's definitely gotten way worse. Truck traffic especially, man, I cannot believe all the trucks on the road. And I know that there's not enough freight to fill all those trucks to the degree where the rates would be good. Just in a little bit of research I've done, freight levels we're down a little bit below, I think, even what pre-COVID levels were. Yet, we've got post-COVID truck capacity that is trying to take up all this freight and competing for freight. And it's not the first time we've seen things like this. It happens. It goes in cycles. It goes in waves like this all the time. But the other thing that really kind of got me is the loading and unloading. Even though I do LTL, I'm not allowed on the dock at a lot of these places that we go load at. I might go make 8 pickups and I'm not allowed on the dock for any of it. So, getting the pickups in order and everything is hugely important because we do a split frozen and chilled to make sure everything's correct, in order correctly. And fortunately for us, the places we work with, we deal with every week, several times a week. So they know our operation and they work with us. But I cannot believe all the places we deliver where the drivers, there's almost no contact with a human anymore. There's a couple places I've been to where you check in at the guard shack and then, you back into a door and you drop your paperwork in a mailbox and then, they send you a text and you pull away from the door and your paperwork's laying in the back of your trailer and you paid your lumper fee all via an app on your phone. Man, that was unheard of even 10 years ago, but 30 years ago when I started, back in 91, there was still a lot of what we called at the time fingerprinting, a lot of hand loading and unloading of our freight. Fortunately, at the time I got started, most everything went on pallets. We hauled quite a bit of stuff that was on slip sheets. And man, I can remember unloading French fries, meat loads. Man, we hauled a lot of stuff out of IBP back in the late 90s that I hauled. That stuff was all on the floor and everything had to come off and get stacked on pallets. And I was greedy. I wanted to make the money. So rather than hire a lumper and lose out on all that, I unloaded it and just charged them back like I was a lumper. But it amazes me now when I go places, you don't touch anything, and I don't know if it's just a post-COVID thing or if it was something that was building up. I really think that it really came along with the advent of these large lumper services where a lot of this started. I can remember back in the early 90s, we used to unload at Safeway in Spokane, and we had a father-son that was there that unloaded all of our produce loads, and it was $50 a load for the entire load to unload. And really, even then, that was quite reasonable freight or lumper charge. I got to roll my window down a little bit. I'm getting hot here. For an entire load, $50. It's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but that was, to me, it was worth it. $50. Those guys would get it unloaded in about an hour and a half, and it would take me 4. So to me, it was worth it. But then that Worldwide Services Incorporated, WSSI, came in and they started all these lumper services at all these different warehouses. And it started out like at Albertsons and Safeway down in the Bay Area and back east, and then they ended up kind of creeping into our little area in Spokane. And it went from being $100 or $50 to anywhere from $75 to $175 for them to unload, depending on if pallets were turned sideways, if anything was stacked, you know. And the thing with those lumper services all pay a percentage back to the warehouse that they're in. And I think all these big companies went, you know, we can make some money off of this and not allow drivers on the dock, and we can just make money on this. You know, it might only be 3% or 5% or 10% or whatever their fee is. I have no idea. But I know those lumper services are paying back the warehouse for them to be there. And it makes money for the warehouse, you know, whatever company it is, because they're not having to pay the work comp claims for guys getting hurt that are running the pallet jacks in and out of the trailers and unloading trailers and things like that. That lumper service, you know, whether it be Capstone or WSSI or whoever, Capstone's the big one now, they're covering all of the work comp claims and all that, all the workers' comp insurance, all the liability insurance, all that stuff is done by Capstone. So it's a lot less output that these big companies have. And having said all that about loading and unloading, I think that's where there's a huge disconnect now between the younger drivers, or the newer drivers, not necessarily younger, and us guys that have been around for a long time, because we remember that was part of our job. You didn't see, and forgive me if this offends you guys, I don't really mean to, but you didn't see a lot of guys that weighed 300, 400 pounds out there driving truck back in the 90s and 80s and 70s. Partly because a lot of the guys that started driving in the 70s came out of the Vietnam area. They were military members. They were fit and in really good shape. You know, you started seeing some guys that were getting heavier in the 90s because it was starting to get, you know, things were getting lazier. Lumpers services were getting to be more common. But again, they weren't everywhere. You know, there was a lot of stuff we did where we unloaded the freight. And it depended on what we were hauling. You know, I can remember loading apples back in the early 90s, and they would bring the apples in on a slip sheet machine. We'd put pallets down on the floor and had everything turned sideways, because at that time, the company I was working for, we were pulling either the 40-foot Dole containers for hauling bananas. We'd bring bananas north and then take apples south. Or all of our trailers, with the exception of two, were all old 46-foot, 96-inch wide trailers. So they weren't, everything had to get 24 pallets of apples in, or 22 pallets of apples, you had to turn everything sideways, or it wasn't going to fit. So, and then stack down around the front where the chute came out of the reefer unit up front, because the pallets were too high to fit underneath. So anyway, what would happen then, we'd lay the pallets down, they'd get everything in there, and we'd get down to where we were going, and we'd have 6, 7, 8 drops. We had to unload all that. We didn't always have the ability to get a lumper to unload our loads. So there's a lot of times, you know, they couldn't take the pallets off the trailer because some of the places didn't have a forklift. So, you know, they'd just bring pallets over, and you'd set the pallet down on the ground and start unloading boxes of apples. And if anybody's ever hauled apples, you know the boxes are glued together to keep them from tipping over. They ride better that way. So it was just a big pain. And that's something that I think a lot of the younger guys and newer guys just don't understand. And that's where the flexibility in the hours of service rules, you know, where I did my video on the 11 and 14 rule, that's where a lot of that flexibility needs to come from, you know, or at that time really needed to be there. But just huge changes, man. I mean, you know, the trucks, I'm not a fan of all the emissions garbage that are on these trucks. It's just a huge problem. Always something waiting to happen. Even if you maintain it properly, you're still going to have issues and breakdowns. I've never seen breakdowns in my career like I have since 2010. You know, I know they were running DPFs and everything in 06 and 07. EGR valves started coming around. I think the Series 60, they started putting the EGR valves on those, I think in 05 or 06. You know, and then Cat went to their A-cert motor with the extra turbo, and Cummins with their EGR system on the ISX in 06, and just problem after problem after problem. And you know, I like I tell people, I really think that the times from about the late 80s through about 2002 were really the pinnacle golden age of trucking, in my opinion. because we had big horsepower. We had trucks that were geared that could run. We didn't have all the emissions garbage. We had electronic engines that were super reliable, that would run 800, 900,000, a million miles without any real issues. Just absolutely amazing. You know, the regulations were there, but they weren't hammering on us as hard. They watched us. Believe me, man, you got your logbooks checked a lot back in the 80s and 90s at the scales, but you know, we all knew how to kind of get around that and make that all work. It was a whole different time. It really was. It was like the pinnacle. Again, it's just my opinion. It was the pinnacle of the trucking industry. And talking to a lot of guys that are older than me, even they have a tendency to agree. You know, I mean, deregulation kind of screwed us on our rates and everything, but man, we made good money back in the 90s and early 2000s. And like I say, the trucks were amazing. You know, now they're nice. You know, they're way more comfortable. The first trucks I drove, you know, they had air ride suspension, but it was all solid mount cabs and sleepers. There was no air ride cab and sleeper on hardly anything. And then all that stuff started coming out, made it really nice, you know. But, it's trucking no matter what. It's not an easy job. It's not a hard job per se, like digging a ditch and, you know, swinging a pickaxe and a shovel all day or anything like that. But it's a physically demanding and it's a mentally demanding job. It always has been and it always will be. And no matter what they do to try to make it easier, it's still going to be hard, because ultimately the driver is the common factor in everything that goes on in a truck. The driver is the one who's in control and needs to be safe, needs to know how to operate his equipment. Not only know how to operate it, and that's the other thing that's changed a lot too, is how many guys have absolutely zero idea how everything works on their trucks, how the air brake system works, how the Jake brakes work, the drivetrain, the transmissions, the gears. There's so many guys that really don't know. And that to me makes them about the same as, you know, Sally soccer mom with her minivan that doesn't have a clue how anything in her car works, other than now there's a check engine light and a buzzer and her car's sputtering. You know, there should be, I think, again, these are just my opinions, and I like to share them and hear what your guys' thoughts are. But I think there needs to be some more training on how things work. It would make it a lot easier for drivers to understand when there is a problem, to know what, and maybe even how to fix it. A lot of the stuff that goes on in these trucks, even though they're complicated with all the computers and electronics and everything, it's still a 4-stroke diesel engine underneath all that stuff. And a lot of times what I've seen, you know, in my experience with the shop and everything, a lot of times it's simple stuff that causes a lot of these problems. You know, guys are idling their trucks like they shouldn't be doing with these DPFs, you know. The amount of soot that gets crammed into them when you're idling is crazy. And, you know, so idling is really, really bad. We used to idle our trucks all the time. I mean, you know, we had to. Not all of us had bunk heaters. We didn't have, APUs weren't even really thought of. Some of the high-end bed buggers and some of the guys, you know, that hauled cars and stuff, the high-end car haulers and that, they had APUs, you know, with their big sleepers. But us average truck drivers, owner operators, freight haulers, produce haulers, whatever, we didn't have all that stuff. You know, so to stay warm, we ran the truck. To stay cool, we ran the truck. You know, it was always great in the springtime and early fall when you could just shut everything off and leave your windows open, put some screens in and get a good night's sleep when it was quiet. But yeah, it just, you know, not knowing how your trucks work is really, it puts the driver at a disadvantage. And it puts an owner-operator at a disadvantage when he goes to a shop, because he doesn't know if the shop is raking him over the coals or not for what he's doing, for the repairs that are being done. You know, I mean, how many guys have you seen out there that'll go pay somebody to change a tail light or a headlight, or, you know, a good example, the airline on your fifth wheel, you know, for the slide, a lot of times gets pinched off because over time they stretch and they sag and they get down between the brackets there and slide your fifth wheel ahead all the way and you pinch the line. There's a lot of guys, they can't even change those, and most of them now are simple push connects. And it's just because they haven't been trained, they don't have the knowledge, and they've been conditioned to think that that's beyond their ability, and it's really not. Really, in all reality, most of this stuff is very simple. So my advice, and I'm going to end this here just in a couple minutes, my advice, if you're an owner-operator, buy a grease gun and some grease. Figure out where all the grease zerks are in your truck and grease your own truck. Get underneath it once a week. Grease is the cheapest, most effective preventive maintenance you can do on your truck to save you a lot of headaches. Worn shackle pins, tie rod ends, king pins, that kind of thing, man, wreak a lot of havoc with front end wear on your truck and tire wear, vibrations from dry U-joints, and I know a lot of these trucks now have sealed U-joints, and that's a different thing altogether, but, and with disc brakes now, there's not a lot to grease anymore. You don't have S-cam shafts and whatnot to grease. You still got a slack adjuster. It still needs to take a little bit of grease, but get a grease gun, get underneath your truck, inspect it, know what you're looking for. And if you don't know, ask questions. Find somebody that does and say, hey, does this look normal? This little seepage of oil around that seal right there, is that normal? Well, no, but it's, it's not bad enough to worry about. Let's keep an eye on it, on your wheel seals. One of the things I've always done, and it comes from, running old oil bath wheels on trailers, is anytime I've ever stopped to pee or put fuel in, I walk around my truck, I thump my tires, and I feel all the hubs, the drive axle, the steer, and the trailer hubs. And I've had guys ask me, why do you do that? And I do it because if they're going to be warm in the summertime, and they're going to be, hot, but they should never be so hot you can't touch them. If they're hot enough that you can't touch the hub, you have a bearing issue, you have something else going on, you need to get your truck fixed right away. You need to get it into a shop and get it taken care of before you have a wheel end failure and lose a set of duals and a brake drum and everything else, like I've seen happen a couple times, and it's pretty spectacular when it does. But anyway, I've kind of rambled on and changed a few subjects here, but overall, guys, the trucking industry is still amazing. I still love it. I love all the people in this business. Even if I don't get along with them and I don't see eye to eye with everything they say or do, man, I still respect it. It's like I said, it's a thankless job, man. There's so many people that just hate what we do and hate everything about us, and it's due to ignorance. So videos like this and getting out and talking and trying to portray a good image, and being respectful and courteous to other people and a little empathetic. Empathy, for those of you that don't know what the word means, it really means more of an understanding. It's not sympathy and it's not compassion. It's more of, trying to understand the other side, where somebody else is coming from. And, if you don't have some empathy towards them to hear what they have to say, then it just, man, you just end up just butting heads. And we don't need that. We don't need any more of that in this industry. We have enough of it as it is. And I really think that, stuff like this, these discussions can really bring us together as a group of drivers, as a group of people. And there's nothing that makes me happier now than to see all these women drivers out there, man, because when I was training new drivers, some of the best students I had were women, because they listened and they didn't think they knew everything. And guys, unfortunately, it's a male trait, and it's not toxic. It's a male trait. We have a hard time listening to someone else, especially when we have an idea in our head of how things already are. And it makes it very difficult sometimes to train that out of people. Women, man, God bless you. You're out here in an industry that is still predominantly male. I'd say it's probably still in that 85 to 90% range of male to female drivers. So, you're looking at about one, maybe 2 out of every 10 drivers is a female. God bless you. It's not an easy job, Trucks are still big. Things are heavy. Not everything is easy to do with them. So, again, man, my hat's off to you, my bald head, and keep doing what you're doing. Guys, be safe out there. I love you. I respect each and every one of you. I appreciate you all. Take care. Keep the shiny side up and the greasy side down. We'll catch you on the flip side. See ya.